Hopefully this is a topic that's not divisive. On the contrary, it's a topic that unites us all. And it's always also a very business pragmatic topic as well, because I sincerely believe that it's a way to retain talent, and we all know that costs businesses a huge amount when they lose talent. So this is really a topic that can help people attract talent and retain talent. So why do people and companies need to stand for more? Before we go into that topic, Philippa, tell us a bit more about yourself. Introduce yourself and tell us what you're passionate about, who inspires you. Tell us a bit more about you.
Okay. My name is Philippa White, and I'm the founder and managing director of the International Exchange, or otherwise is TIE. My family is British and South African, and so I don't sound like it, but they are. So I was born in South Africa, but I grew up in Canada, and I went to university in Canada. And then I worked and lived in the UK for a bit after graduating from university, met my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and moved to Brazil in 2005. I now have 2 little girls who are 2 and 6. And TIE became a company in 2006. It's actually registered in the UK. But I've been running it from Brazil since then, and we had our first ever placement in 2007, and so next year it will be our 10-year anniversary, which is very exciting. Okay, what am I passionate about? I would say I'm one of these people that is regularly covered in goosebumps. So if I listen to an amazing song, if I read an amazing quote, or I have an interesting conversation, I feel it all through my body. And on a regular occasion, I feel that with my work. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but it's true. I'm so passionate about what I do and the conversations that I have with the beneficiaries, or with the CEOs that we're talking to, or with the participants that go on TIE, or the NGOs we talk to. There's so many different people involved, and regularly, daily, I'm covered in goosebumps. So I have to say what I do is what really makes me tick.
Yeah.
And who inspires me? I would say my late uncle. And he passed away a good few years ago now, but he was a doctor in South Africa. And whenever I go there, I would have the most incredible conversations with him. He was involved with the struggle, so the anti-apartheid movement. He really, truly stood for something, and being somebody who grew up in Winnipeg in Canada, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what it meant to sort of fight for something that you believed in, and he really did. He spoke a number of different languages, and he kept saying, I'm not a vet. I'm a doctor. I have to be able to speak to my patients. And that wasn't a normal way of behaving in apartheid South Africa as a white doctor. And he was actually the doctor for Nelson Mandela during his presidential campaign. And he, at his funeral, and this was sort of a turning point for me, in the congregation, you had the Minister of Health and his 2 bodyguards, and then you also had so many people from the local shanty towns, who then also stood up and spoke about how much Neil, my uncle, had impacted their lives, how he risked his life to tell them, when they were, for example, in jail or in the middle of a place in South Africa where they couldn't come out because they were Black, but he would risk everything to tell them what was happening on the outside. And for me, it was just a beautiful example of the bridging of 2 different worlds and the importance of bringing 2 different types of people together. And for me, it was a big wake-up call, and I think it was sort of the starting of TIE at that point. So, and he was a huge inspiration on my life.
I can really understand why, and I think the multi-identity world that you live in, you truly are a world citizen, and I think we need more people like that. So tell us how that inspiration then turned into TIE, so again, the International Exchange.
TIE, that obviously was one of the first kind of turning points, I guess, for just the first seed, I guess, for TIE. But I think the basis of TIE probably started when I was working in London. I worked in Lee Burnett and BBH, and it was when I was at BBH that I was really aware of three kind of main insights. And I think that that's what sort of started TIE. The first one was, I was at a dinner party actually with my family. And we were all sitting around the table. It was in the countryside in England. And I think it was around Christmas time, I can't remember. But anyway, my whole family's in the helping people industries. So, you know, doctors, social workers, environmental engineers, public health professionals. And then there was me, the one that works in advertising. And it was this feeling of unworthiness. And it was weird because I don't have a problem talking. I can usually contribute to most conversations. But in this particular case, I couldn't. And I was so aware of this feeling of unworthiness, which I hated, because actually I really loved what I did. And I thought long and hard about what I wanted to do. And there was so much about the industry that I adored. It's creative, you know, full of really interesting and intelligent people. You're constantly doing something different. You know, I felt inspired, but there was a part for me that was missing, that I also wanted to feel genuinely proud of the skill set that I'd worked so hard to develop. And I knew that I wasn't the only one that felt that way. And then I sort of, the second pillar, I guess, of inspiration or insight was the recognition that the industry, and not even just the communications industry, but the private sector needed to stand for more. And we needed people on the outside of it to stop being so skeptical of it. And we needed people on the inside of it to genuinely feel proud to work in it. And I wanted to provide the industry as a whole with an opportunity to see the potential that it has in order to be a force for change. And then I think the third insight was the fact, in order to get there, in order for the sector to be able to recognize its potential, you need to be able to develop the strongest employees and professionals working in the sector. They need to be able to be brave and confident, and they need to be able to embrace diversity and be able to take calculated risks, and to be able to gain those insights to be able to drive the sector in the direction that it needs to go in. And that isn't just going to happen by doing the same thing all the time. And so that's sort of where TIE came from. It was sort of providing individuals with an opportunity to genuinely do something good with their skills and feel proud of them, to provide an opportunity for the sector to do more, but then to develop the future leaders of these companies to be able to drive the companies in the direction that they need to go in. And that's really what TIE does, I guess.
That's, you know, a big ambition to have, but it, you know, little by little you are making a huge difference. So the brands are not enough. I think people inside or behind the brands also have to make a difference, and they have to find their purpose and help companies that they're working for find their difference. Why do you think brands and companies need to start behaving differently? Because at the time when you set up TIE, purpose-led companies wasn't as big as it is today. It's still not big enough, but why do you think brands and companies need to behave differently?
Yeah, and it's a really good question, and you're right. 10 years ago, I mean, it's crazy when I think back to the conversations that we were having, and actually, I mean, the world is a very different place, and obviously it's actually getting a bit easier now to do what I do now than it was 10 years ago. But I think it rests on two very simple dynamics. One, it's the consumers that need and want brands and companies to behave differently, and it's the employees. I think it's as simple as that. I think if you look at the consumers, you know, people are becoming much more discerning. People are well aware of what's happening with the world, climate change being one of the challenges that we face. And we know that consumerism is a huge contributor to that. We know that, I mean, there's just so many challenges that our world faces, and people want to feel like they can be a part of making the world a better place and a part of that change. And I think if people feel that they can do that through what they buy and the services that they buy or the products that they buy, then they feel that they are doing their part to try and make a difference. And we know that through Unilever and Meaningful Brands, we know that they have outperformed their other brands. This year, I was at a presentation and somebody from Unilever was talking about that. And so we know that there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I think that's part of it. But I think the other part of it is employees. The best employees that are coming into the workplace now, they are looking for companies that have a purpose. And we're not talking about companies that just are, talking about doing good things. We're talking about, walking the talk, being, having a purpose all the way through, the company. And I think it's interesting. I think things are changing now. People used to think that you had two choices in life. One was to do, to do good. You had to work in the third sector or the public sector, or you could do well and you work in the private sector. And I think we now recognize that actually you can do both in the private sector, and it's those companies that recognize that opportunity and that potential. Once you find that purpose and people actually believe in it and understand it and recognize it, then people will want to work in those companies.
We both agree on that wholeheartedly, and that I see my role in HR as a way of aligning people's experience to the company purpose. And I don't think it's easy for companies. I think it's easier, but I still don't think it's easy for companies to find a true purpose that's authentic and aligned. So sometimes the employee pull, so employees finding their own purpose can help companies find the bigger purpose and drive this sense of belonging. And when we get that right in Unilever, for example, that does build a whole different sense of belonging. But just coming back to that consumer activism a bit, so technology is also on our side as well. So how do you think that consumer activism is helping marketeers stand for more and organizations as a whole stand for more?
I think it's such an exciting time, actually, and like you say, because of technology, because of the internet, knowledge is power. People are much more aware of what is happening and how they can actually be a big part of that change. I was watching the film. You're talking about the election and how everyone needs to go out and vote. I highly recommend everybody watches the film that Leonardo DiCaprio just launched, Before the Flood. And I think everybody needs to watch that. It's a terrifying film, but it's obviously based on real truth and very real situations that we're all facing right now. And in that film, there's an interview with Barack Obama and Leo, and they're talking about climate change. And Leonardo DiCaprio was asking Barack Obama how he had clearly faced a lot of challenges around trying to push for more change around climate change. And Barack Obama said, and actually I'm going to quote him here, he said, if someone came into power now and started to campaign against climate science, reality has a wonderful way to bop you on the nose if you're not paying attention. The public is starting to realize the science, and you can't refute it or dispute it. It's starting to affect many people directly, and the public will start to pressure governments to take action. And I think it's not happening enough, but the more that people will start to be impacted by things, the more that people will start to lobby the government or put pressure on the government. And I think consumer activism works in a very similar way. In the 1990s, obviously you had the boycott against Nike for the way that Nike was doing business. And it fundamentally impacted Nike's bottom line. And as a result, Nike now do things in a very different way. They're much more open, they're much more transparent. And I think, we're now, even now, there's the big campaign that's happening against the Daily Mail for all of the ridiculous headlines that they're spewing. And now, I've signed the petition. I'm sure that you've signed the petition. Like, if you haven't signed the petition, I highly recommend you signing the petition. Because now people have a voice, and people can start to, make people and companies accountable. And I think that's the power that we're, it's an exciting time. And I do think that, it's just showing the power of the consumer's voice and how that is making companies and brands need to be more responsible.
What advice would you give to a young CEO or a team leader who wanted to do good on the job? So who wanted to have it all? Because I think in today's world you can do both. grow your business, improve the bottom line, and do good. So what advice would you give to a young CEO or a team leader?
With Thai, it's interesting because I come across so many different company leaders and different visionaries, different ways of doing business. And obviously I'm quite lucky because the people that we work with tend to be much more open-minded, and they do tend to have more of a vision that's in line with obviously Thai, because obviously they probably wouldn't work with us if they didn't. But I think a lot of it comes down to purpose. I mean, we keep saying the same word, but I really do believe that it comes down to that. I think the key is if a company can find out what their purpose is, and like you say, it's not easy. And there's and at the end of this, I can give some links or different companies that can actually help with this. But finding a purpose, I think, is key, because not only will it then help your employees believe in what you do and your consumers believe in what you do, but I think once you find that purpose, you can then figure out how to talk about yourselves in a better way, which will then really improve your PR. And it's not just about greenwashing. It's not just about talking the talk, it's about properly embodying it. And I really truly believe that the private sector can be a huge force for change. I mean, I really believe that. I think the private sector has the money, they have the human resources, they're also able to make decisions incredibly quickly, and versus the public sector, which is very bureaucratic, and the third sector, which just isn't, it can sometimes act quickly, but also funds are a huge restriction, so they don't have access to money as quickly. But I really do believe that the private sector has what it takes to be able to make a change. But in order to be able to do that, you need to figure out what is your strategy and how can you be a part of that change. And again, I think that's where purpose comes in. It helps to create that strategy where everyone throughout the company can see how they can be a part of making the world a better place. And I think a lot of it then also comes down to the employees. We know that there's corporate change makers, and I'm such a big believer in corporate change makers and intrapreneurs. You've got entrepreneurs doing things like, I'm an entrepreneur setting up a company, but intrapreneurs are as important, particularly in this space. Intrapreneurs are people within already existing companies that act in an entrepreneurial way, but can see opportunity and can use the resources, the human and financial resources of these big companies to make really big change. And I think that's where all of this is really exciting. And I think companies, CEOs and company leaders, if they can figure out how to empower your employees to think like that and to help them be a part of that change in that way, and then of course acting environmentally and ethically sound, I think you can be a part of a movement that really can start to make the world a much better place using the power that you have.
Most definitely. And I don't think we talk enough about greenwashing within the organisation. We've talked a lot about the issues that brands have had when they've tried to tag on purpose. But I think there are still too many corporates that are tagging on purpose internally. They haven't found their true purpose yet. And just like consumers are smarter and smarter, employees are extremely smart as well. So I think what Thai does is really help people and companies find their true purpose through experiences that send people out of their comfort zone. And we'll come back to that. But just before we go there, you talked about entrepreneurs. What about HR? How can HR help? This is a people series. We're trying to look at ideas where there's people innovation. How can HR help some of the topics you've already touched on?
I think HR are the key to all of this. I mean, HR, everything that I've sort of talked about now, a lot of it comes down to people. It's about retaining the right people, recruiting the right people, promoting the right people so that they can drive the business in the direction that it needs to go and act in the way that it needs to act. It all comes down to people, and HR is the one that does all of that. So I think HR understanding what that vision is of the company and probably being a major part in creating it and working very closely with the company leaders and the CEOs to create that vision. And then they hopefully would be the ones that would really be implementing it. And so it's also, I think, recognizing how to empower employees. I think it's, and actually we do that a lot with Thai. I mean, a Thai experience in our mind is almost just the beginning. They go through this incredible experience, this life-changing experience, which totally shakes them up in how they act and think. But then the whole key is, and actually one of the last emails that we send out to them is, this is just the beginning. And the whole idea is, how then do they bring that thinking and that energy and that vision back to then drive it home in the company? And I think it's having HR and the HR processes and to help empower these employees to figure out how they can continue to realize what they love and what they do, and how to continue doing what they would like to do within their role at their company. And I think it's not easy at all, but I think HR is a big part of how, helping to unlock all of that and help to make it happen.
And if we're lucky enough to have had similar experiences to the Thai experience, I think that can be even more powerful. And I don't think it's just for big advertising networks or private sector, huge companies. It can be right at the very beginning. If you start shaping and using the founder values very early on in the beginning of a small company, using experiences like the Thai experience, I think that can make a huge difference, because you start walking the talk early on, and then that becomes far more authentic. Yeah. So it's not a question of scale. I think it's a question of helping people experience as soon as possible so they can make it part of the way they do business. So I suppose one of the challenges, Philippa, in this world of VR and video and mobile first and international artificial intelligence is, do people still have to go out and experience things, or can they just put a VR headset on them? Yeah. How important is it, and how important will it be in the future to get people out of their comfort zone and really experiencing what you allow them to experience through Thai?
I really believe that stepping out of your comfort zone is a real opportunity to grow. If you think about it, when was the last time that you properly felt uncomfortable in a situation that really kind of tested you? And probably, it doesn't happen very often. And I think it's really easy to get stuck into the monotony of life. To people who are listening to this, I'm sure that, your routine is probably a pretty, it's a routine that is very set into your day. You wake up in the morning, you have your breakfast, probably the similar thing for breakfast in the same sort of way. You then get on the tube, you then go to work, you then probably sit in a similar desk. You might go to a meeting off-site, but you'll come back, you'll sort of deal with similar things. Oh, it's lunchtime, then it's, God, I got to pick the kids up from school or whatever, need to go home, dinner, watch a bit of TV, read a book, go to bed, and then you do it all over again. And I think it's very easy to get stuck into the monotony and of life. And it's so important to shake yourself out of that, because that's when you learn, that's when you grow, that's when you feel inspired, that's where you get the ideas to then do things in a different way. And it's when you're really uncomfortable that your senses are really heightened, and you see what you're capable of and what you really know. And I know this because we do this. As I say, we're reaching our 10-year anniversary tomorrow. We do this all the time. I've got 2 people on Thai right now. I had an incredible conversation with one of them 2 weeks ago. So the way that Thai works, people go on the experience. So she's in Mozambique. She's an incredibly competent account person at a very big agency in New York. She runs a very big piece of business. She is very good at what she does. But she was, she's out in Mozambique. She's out there for 30 days. She's still there right now, but we had this conversation a week after she arrived. And I would say 85% of the time, it is vital that we have that conversation within a week, because we find these highly competent professionals like deer caught in a headlight. Yeah. And it's, we're having this conversation usually over Skype, and you can tell that they're hardly even wanting to move their head because they've just got so much information that's there, and they're not really sure how to process it. And oh my gosh, life is so different, and they're in a different world, working with different people in a different language. The way that they're even getting to work is different, and they're having to process all of this information in an environment that's different, in an industry that's different, on a subject that they've never even had to think about. And there's a lot on the line, because it's, they're doing this because they also genuinely want to help an organization and people that will genuinely benefit from what they're doing. And this particular individual that I was speaking to, there was actually a lot on the line. It's an organization that deals with marine life and basically saving it from going extinct. And they're basically very close to getting very high net worth individuals to donate a lot of money. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. But she needed to create a strategy to get their interest. And she had 30 days to do that. And she felt so much pressure. And on this call, she said, she was basically reaching her breaking point. And she said, I feel like a fraud. I feel like pretty soon people are going to realize that I don't know what I'm doing. And of course, it's our job to kind of provide that safety net to ensure the success of an experience like this. And that's why we have to have that call with people to help them work through this experience. But of course, fast forward, even 2 days later, and in her blog, she's writing a blog, and in her blog, she's very, very open to this whole experience, and she's put it all there. But in it, she said, I really was reaching my breaking point, and I can't tell you, now 2 days on, and of course, she's doing incredibly well, and everything is definitely on, things are going very, very well. But, 2 days later, she said, this was one of the most inspiring experiences that I've experienced. And I needed that to be able to recognize what I'm capable of. And I think I often use the analogy on Thai and on these calls of going to the gym, because it's actually, when you're doing weights and, the next day you feel so much pain and it hurts. And it's actually a good pain, because you say, oh, okay, God, you're walking a bit funny and your body hurts, but you know that your muscles are going to get stronger and you're going to feel better. And your body's going to be healthier. And it's the same thing with being out of your comfort zone. Yep. It kind of needs to hurt for you to be able to get to that next stage. And actually, I'm going to quote somebody who was on Thai recently. It's a guy from Grey London. His name's Tom Rees. And in his application letter, he said, the experiences that I have enjoyed and learnt from most so far in life seem to be the ones that forced me to take deep, calming breaths before them. And I think that's just it. It's the experiences that you learn and grow from the most that that are the ones that take you out of your comfort zone.
Thank you, Philippa. I think we could listen all afternoon to more of those testimonials. We know that pain does shape great leaders. So I think it's great what you're doing. I think it's great that you're accompanying people, and then when they get back to work, it really becomes a way of life, rather than it just being a one-off as well. So the pain would be pointless if it was just a one-off, but you're really taking people through that experience and then helping them live it back in their real world, which is genuinely a very, very different world. So, obviously people can follow up on the International Exchange website and see other amazing testimonials. But just as we close, Philippa, and say thank you, unfortunately we haven't got any ability to see any questions, but I'm sure people have got lots of questions, would love to follow up on what they've just heard from you. So what would your advice be on in terms of how people can follow up if they're keen to hear more?
Yeah, reach out. If you go to our website, which is www.theinternationalexchange.co.uk, our contact details are there. All of our stories are there. There's a wealth of information there, but feel free to reach out. I will receive the email if you have any questions.
And you already mentioned a great film to watch, so Before the Flood, and there's another talent that Philippa has, which is writing. Her blogs are absolutely amazing.